Learning a language by listening to a language. That's stupid. Hey, how are you going? Hope you're doing well. Didn't say that in either of the first two videos, but whatever. Maybe I didn't hope you were doing well then. No, seriously, this is the third part of a video in which I'm responding to Christian from Kangaroo English. If you haven't seen the first two parts, this might make more sense if you've done that. So, nu kör vi.
Please don't let the promises of false prophets and prophets rob you of the gift of language.
Okay, so Christian's implication here is fairly obvious. Of course, there are people who would scam you with anything, really, and there probably are input hypothesis phonies out there, fake gurus, I don't know. But this insinuation that the so-called myth of input is often used among language scammers is probably the biggest error of Christian's whole video, because if you remember from my first video, I outlined 3 different schools of thought on language learning. There is classroom learning, there is speak early, and there is input heavy. Of these 3, the input-heavy approach is the one that is A, the hardest to monetize, and B, has the least history of scammers. Now, I'm not saying that no one has monetized it. Obviously they have. I am not saying that no one has used it to scam people. I'm guessing they have. But when you think about what the input approach actually advocates for, it basically says, listen to and read material that is designed for native speakers, and most of that is either going to be free or on a platform that I don't own, like say Netflix. For example, in my video about learning Swedish and my tips on doing that, I named SVT Play and I said it's free and it's full of stuff in Swedish. What are you waiting for? How do I stand to gain from that? Even if it was some kind of partnership with SVT Play, which it very much isn't, they're not going to pay me for that. It's free. Now, the speak early approach is a little bit easier to monetize through things like italki or Lingoda, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think those things have their place, and I myself am a teacher on italki. But the classroom approach, that can be monetized as long as you've got any kind of product or course or something that claims to explain even a small parcel of the language, like how to use the French subjunctive, or how to solve this particular issue of grammar, or how to learn to spell in Hungarian. It doesn't matter how small you make the thing, you can just charge €5 for it, €10 for it. Do you claim to teach the whole language? You can charge more than that. Instagram, YouTube, other places on the internet are full of this garbage that will claim that you can learn Japanese in 14 weeks through this simple course that teaches you. No, you can't. It's bullshit. This area of language education is rank with phony courses and people claiming that they have the answer to why you haven't been able to learn Mandarin yet. It's always going to be easier to monetize something that you can wrap up as a tangible little course, like a little thing that just teaches you this or that solves all your grammar woes. And Krashen himself pointed out that his research undermines a lot of this stuff because it says it can't actually be taught, it has to be acquired. I want to make an amendment to the video at this point in order to make it clear that I am not saying that every course that says it will teach you something in a language is necessarily a scam. I have purchased various video and audio courses and mostly been satisfied that they provided what they said they would and that the price was fair. In my opinion, where it becomes a scam is when they try to convince you that in order to learn a certain language quickly, you need their course because of the way in which they explain the language. Not only would I say that this claim is never true, but I would also argue that in the majority of cases, this claim is not made in good faith. And while we're talking about false prophets, that is PH prophets, it is exactly that which convinced me of the value of input, because I heard the idea sometime in 2018 or 2019 and I dismissed it for many of the same reasons that Christian outlines in this video here. I was just like, learning a language by listening to a language, that's stupid. And people asked me if I'd heard of the teachings of a man named Matthew of Oregon, and I dismissed them because it was another obvious false prophet. That is a false doctrine. I knew it to be wrong. And then I saw this.
そういうふうにそれを利用してですね、何をしたいか。 そうですね。これから考えてるのは、やっぱり、これ、今日本人の多くは、英語できなくて、でもそれで困ってるという状態が起こってるわけなんですよね。本当に、日本人の多くは英語を勉強したい、できるようになりたいと思ってるんですけれども、でも、その学習法とか勉強法が、本当に効率的じゃなくて、
And no, I was not converted on the spot in a flash of light from above or from my screen, but a seed was planted, a very resilient seed, one that said, "That wasn't fake. How did you do that?" And over a few months, I discovered that there, free on his YouTube channel, was his methodology, how it works, why it works, where it could be better, where the theory and the practice don't line up, what went wrong, what went right, and most importantly for me, why I still sucked at Swedish despite having spoken it regularly for 3 years. And I know it sounds like I'm trying to get people to watch more of Matt's videos, and I'm not. You should watch more of my videos. But this is important because Christian here speaks about false prophets, and I don't know why we don't pay more attention to this idea of the proof being in the pudding, so to speak. Is the person who is claiming that their method works actually speaking the language to the level that you would want to? And at the time, Matt was the only person I'd found who could actually do that. So as much as I had been certain that this input stuff was complete nonsense, I started slowly rethinking that. Is it just possible that I have had this wrong? Now, this next part is not to be mean to Christian. I think he would approve of me doing this. Christian speaks Spanish comfortably enough by the looks of it. I mean, I can clearly hear that he's Australian when he speaks Spanish, which is, of course, fine. But if he's going to take the input hypothesis, which, as he points out, is kind of hallowed ground, but as I point out, only in certain circles, and call it BS, then I want to see the results. You're telling me that this research-based finding is incorrect. Where's your evidence for this? Now you might say, well, he learned Spanish. Oh, yes, that is true. And I did also learn Swedish and French to the point that I could follow along and get my point across in a conversation. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to sound like an intelligent adult when I spoke, and I started listening to what Matt had to say because of Matt's results. Now, curiously, Matt also followed a prophet PH going by the name of Katsumoto because of his results. Katsumoto, as far as I understand, believed only in the value of input, and therefore, when Matt eventually developed a superior methodology that involved deliberate practice and conscious learning on top of a ton of input, Matt's Japanese became better than Katsumoto's, and I believe that this lines up perfectly with what Christian himself points out earlier in his video. Saying that you learn a language through input is not the entire story, but calling the input hypothesis BS, that is also false. At this point, I need to make a second amendment to the video because after I'd completely finished the filming, Christian got in touch with me saying that the false prophets part of his video was specifically referring to Stephen Krashen and not to Matt or anyone else. I think anyone could be forgiven for not realizing that, because taken with the entirety of what Christian says in his video, it sounds like he's referring to basically anyone who advocates for a lot of input, which is what I feel needs addressing. I'm not here to defend Krashen, as it seems as though if anyone has stood to make a lot of money from this, it's him. He also seems fairly convinced of his own theories and seems only to look for evidence to support them. I don't condone this whether there is money involved or not. I am only here to defend an input-heavy approach in general because I believe that languages are unlike other areas of study in that when we take up a new one, it's basically entirely new to us. The part that is not new is the moving of the mouth, so that part should wait until you've got some idea of what all this new complexity of sound actually means. And finally, I am not denying that there is dissonance here. There is a discrepancy between what has been found in studies and what people's experience is, and then between those studies and what has been found in other studies. So there are lots of discrepancies. Now, I happen to think that that's not at all surprising given how complex the human brain is, the human linguistic model, the development and redevelopment of it at different ages, not to mention the influence of culture and environmental factors and lots of other things. It all adds up to something far more complex than even brain surgery. And as you can see from the lengths of of my videos, discussing this even briefly is no small task, so I can appreciate that Christian's message may have been somewhat abridged. But Christian, who has looked at a lot of academic research before and generally talks about it quite eloquently, has not posited any theories as to why this discrepancy may exist. He's essentially just said, well, in the end, you've got to learn to speak, so the input hypothesis is BS. Now, I mainly used the first two videos to outline where Christian has a very skewed understanding of what the difference between acquisition and learning actually is and what acquisition denotes. And I think that if Christian takes some time to adjust to what language acquisition actually means, because it is quite counterintuitive and it does take some time to adjust to, I think he'll be able to offer some really valuable advice and even some theories as to how and why the discrepancies occur and how we can learn from them so that we can all learn languages better. So to anyone left watching this, then wow, thank you. You obviously like to see me go on about stuff, so check out my second channel. It's called the Reykjavik Review. Check out other videos here. Check out my Patreon. Any of that stuff. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about all this stuff. There's a lot to unpack, I know, in the comments and all that. And I will see you soon, I guess. Bye.